I've been waiting for Motorola to finally abandon Moto mods and make a proper flagship. Look, I won't go into why Moto mods aren't my favorite concept. You could start though with the sheer cost of them, but the truth is that once Motorola committed to them and the 3 years of supporting them on phones going forward, it sort of forced their engineers and their designers' hands. They were stuck in this shape with these components. And while I do commend Motorola for making a bet on something and then following through with their promise to support it for as long as they did, those 3 years came up not too long ago. To me at least though, innovation at the top end of Motorola phones died with those restrictions that Moto mods put on those devices. Well, now that their commitment is done, it seems they finally made a proper flagship. This is the Moto Edge Plus. And now, Motorola did send me a new Moto Edge Plus to borrow, so I figured I would try to do a complete walkthrough on it for you guys. Now, if you're not familiar, complete walkthrough in this channel is where I try to go through every single feature I possibly can on a new device so that you guys are better prepared should you be in the market to actually go buy one. With that said, there is a lot to go through. So, let's get started with the hardware. The first thing you'll notice about it is this very tall, very curved front screen. The screen is a 6.7-inch FHD Plus OLED display that has a 21:9 aspect ratio, so it's skinny but tall, and a 90-degree curve on the sides. Between both of these things and that new smoky sangria color, it definitely helps the device stand out. Now, before you say it, while pretty, yes, that curved screen does make you accidentally tap things while using it occasionally. Thankfully though, Motorola was smart enough to put in an easy way to disable the screen on the edges and pull the content in. You can double tap this floating icon, which we'll delve into more later in this video, and that'll turn on and off the curved edges for the current app, and remember that going forward. You can also, though, go into the display settings and turn it off for apps in there, or turn it off for all apps as well. One thing Motorola did with that curve, though, that is super useful actually, is the ability to add trigger buttons up there to use when playing a game. You can actually map these to any on-screen controls for the game you're playing and be able to tap them instead, which is clever. Another thing to note about this screen is that it's a 90 Hz panel, so it'll have faster scrolling as well as higher frame rates for games that support it. You can also turn this on and off in the settings, and at least it seems so, it isn't an up to 90 Hz option, it's just set straight to 90 Hz. That screen is also HDR10 Plus cable, so it'll be able to display HDR content if you find any. Places like YouTube and Netflix and some games support it, but you usually see like an HDR badge on the specific content if it is supported. We also have support for 100% of the DCI P3 color space in 10-bit color depth. Inside that screen, we have a 25 megapixel f2.0 aperture camera with 0.9 micron sized pixels. Like with most phone cameras nowadays, it bins these pixels together by default in sets of 2x2 in order to get larger pixels that let in more light, but at the trade-off of resolution. This means that you get a 6 megapixel image when done, but with much larger 1.8 micron sized pixels. You can also set it to the full 25 megapixels if you want in the camera settings. That front camera is also capable of recording at 1080p at up to 30 frames a second, and here's what that looks like and the microphones sound like. The phone comes in two colors, that aforementioned smoky sangria and this thunder gray that I have here. Both colors were supposedly inspired by Murano glass blowing. I kind of see it. The phone has a 6000 series aluminum frame with Gorilla Glass 5 on the front and back. We have no IP rating, but Motorola says it's splash resistant. Now that usually just means it'll be okay if you spill liquid on it, but much less so if you drop it in liquid. Moving around the phone, we have nothing on the left, save for that really curved screen. On the right, we have our volume rocker and power button. That power button actually also has some texture to it, so it's easier to find along the edge. And you can choose for double tapping it to either launch the Amazon Assistant if you have her app installed, the Google Assistant, or launch the camera. At the top of the phone, we have a surprise on a flagship nowadays, a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the bottom, we have our nano SIM card slot. There is no micro SD card slot, FYI. And we have one of our two stereo speakers. The other is in the earpiece, that are apparently tuned by a company called Waves Audio, which once won a technical Grammy for breakthroughs in the field of recording in 2011. Whatever they did though, it's loud and crisp. In between both of those, we have our USB-C port that is capable of charging the whopping 5000 milliamp battery inside here at 18 watts when using the included turbocharger. So, as is the usual here on the channel, let's see how that does. Now, in addition to this, we also have 15-watt wireless charging as well. And we also have 5-watt wireless power sharing, so you can charge other Qi cable devices on the back in a pinch. And the edges even light up to tell you where on the back to place the device, which I just thought was a nice little touch. For battery life, Motorola claims 2 days. And while the battery is a massive 5,000 milliamp battery that I was once told by an engineer is basically the limit that we can put in phones right now, 2 days does seem pretty ambitious. So, while it's a very unscientific test, let's at least test it using the screen, speakers, and internet connection running at once by playing a 1080p YouTube video and see how long that lasts. Under the hood, we have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chipset paired with 12 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM and 256 gigs of UFS 3.0 internal storage that apparently has a turbo write feature and can write data to it at up to 800 megabits per second, which I honestly can't think of a reason why you would ever need that speed on your phone, but still, why not, I guess? For security, we have an in-display fingerprint reader that is snappy enough, and there is no facial recognition that I can find in the security settings, so that's your sole option besides the standard PIN, password, pattern, etc. For connectivity, we have Bluetooth 5.1, Wi-Fi 6, and sub-6 and millimeter wave 5G. For more info on Wi-Fi 6 and 5G and how they all actually work and the benefits of them, check out my new explainer series called Decoder that I'll link here. Moving around the back, we have our triple camera system that also includes a time-of-flight sensor to help with autofocus, portrait mode, and AR applications. The first of these cameras is our main camera, which is a 108 megapixel f1.8 aperture camera with a 1 by 1.33 inch sensor size, optical stabilization, and 0.8 micron sized pixels. Now that may sound very familiar as it's a Samsung sensor and is the one from the Galaxy S20 Ultra. One key difference here though is that Motorola is binning those pixels in a 2x2 configuration, whereas Samsung did a 3x3 one. So you get a 27 megapixel final image with 1.6 micron sized pixels compared to the 12 megapixel 2.4 micron sized ones that the S20 Ultra gets. Now I asked why they didn't follow suit to get the still high enough resolution, but with even better low light with the even larger pixels, and they said something to the effect that they have experience and expertise in binning in 2x2, and so that's what they went for. Take that answer as you will. Here are some comparison photos from that main sensor versus the S20 Ultra and a few other devices though for your critiquing pleasure. Next, we have a 16 megapixel f2.2 aperture ultra-wide 117 degree field of view camera with 1 micron sized pixels that aren't binned at all. And here is that versus some other flagship phones' ultra-wide cameras as well. That ultra-wide camera, by the way, is also a macro camera, that when you tap the macro mode in the camera UI, it switches to it and allows you to focus on things much closer to the lens than normal. This also works in video macro mode as well, by the way. And lastly, we have a 3x optical zoom 8 megapixel f2.4 aperture camera with 1 micron sized pixels that again aren't binned and that also has optical stabilization as well. And here is that versus some other flagships' telephoto lenses as well. For video, we can shoot in up to 6K at 30 frames a second, again stepping down from the 8K Samsung is shooting in, but the autofocus is snappy, so maybe there's something to that. We also have slow motion in FHD up to 120 frames per second. Now, let's quickly dive into the other camera modes on the phone. First, we have Portrait, which uses software to blur the background behind a subject to create a faster aperture look from a mirrorless or DSLR camera. We have Portrait Video, which is the same as Portrait Photo, but it attempts to do so in a video. And as with most phones right now that have this feature, it's not great. Cutout. This mode works like portrait mode, but instead of blurring the background, it actually automatically cuts you out from the background and then lets you use their built-in app to replace it with any other image. Think of it like an even crappier version of your background replacement for your video conferencing apps. Spot color lets you tap a color in the image when taking a photo and then will only show that color in the final image. You can also adjust this with the slider at the bottom. Cinematograph allows you to take a short video of something and it'll take a frame from that to make as a still image. You can then highlight any part of the image to have that highlighted part move, and you can then export this out as a GIF or video to share online. We have a standard panoramic mode that lets you start taking an image and then pan the camera to have it stitch multiple images together to create a wider panoramic shot. There's an option in here for ultra res, which allows you to shoot in the full 108 megapixels of the main sensor if you need to, say, crop into it later to get other photos out of it, but at the cost of some dynamic range. Live filter is basically Instagram photo filters, but baked into the image when you take it. That honestly seems dumb to me, as you can't undo them, and in my opinion, you'd be better off taking the image and then adding the filter after instead. There's also a manual pro mode where you can manually control ISO, shutter speed, etc. And instead of it being a separate camera mode you choose, it's a button at the top of your normal camera mode, which is nice. Time lapse lets you record a video and it'll automatically play it back sped up. And finally, we have night vision, which uses AI in multiple shots of various exposure levels, including long exposure shots, to create a much better low light image. Moving on to software, it's running on Android 10, and as with most Motorola phones, the experience is pretty close to what we would consider stock Android, as they usually don't add any UI layer on top of it like most manufacturers do. So, what we do have is their usual Moto features that can all be found in the Moto app, and honestly, I prefer it this way. We have things like twisting the phone twice to open the camera, making 2 chopping motions to turn on the flashlight, lifting the phone to silence an incoming call, and a game optimization feature, etc. And these can all be turned on or off along with a few other genuinely useful additions in that app. Because of the curved display on here, we also have a few that were added, like the ability to use that edge as a notification light of sorts, and even have it only on if the phone is facing down, which is clever since we already have Moto's pretty well received peak display here that you can tap or approach to have it show notifications as well. And you can also turn on Edge Touch, which is the floating icon that I mentioned earlier that can be double tapped to turn on and off the edges for apps, but also can be swiped on for various other actions as well. And again, as with all of these, they can be turned on and off depending on your liking. Now, the Moto Edge Plus is going to launch for $999 and will be initially available, at least, as an exclusive on Verizon, sadly. And of course, as with all Verizon phones, you'll be able to unlock it after it's been running on their network for 60 days. And there you go. What do you guys think? What do you think of the camera compared to those other ones? I mean, especially like the fact that it is the same sensor as the Samsung. How do those two compare to you guys? Let me know in the comments below about that, about anything else you want to talk about with this phone. I would love to hear your opinion. I always do. If you like this video though, please thumbs up or share. It's greatly appreciated. Also, check out the rest of the channel. If you like what you see there, please subscribe and ding the bell next to the word subscribe so you get notified when I do new videos. Also, I'll leave a link below. You can check out my email newsletter. It goes out once a week. It has all the videos that I do here on YouTube, as well as some other tips and tricks and other fun things that don't happen to make it here to video. As always though, regardless guys, thanks for watching.